Hello again, I'm Raider from the Sentinel Initiative, and today we're back to taking a deep dive into the lore of Kingdom Hearts. Now that we're in part 4, it's safe to say that this series is coming to a close. I've only got one more guaranteed part, with another 2 potentials that may or may not happen. So it goes without saying that this is where things are going to start getting into the really weird category of theories. So without further ado, let's get to cracking the mystery of who exactly the Master of Masters is and what lies beneath the hood. If it wasn't already clear, this video is going to contain spoilers, so be warned. This part is likely going to get confusing if you have no idea who the Master of Masters is, so I'm going to give a quick summary. The Master of Masters is the master of the 5 foretellers and Luxu. He essentially orchestrated the Keyblade War in Union Cross, but he can't be entirely blamed for it due to not actually being there. He gave each of his apprentices a task. All of them failed in their tasks except for Ava and Luxu. The master possessed the ability to see the future, and using such power he wrote the Book of Prophecies, an overly cryptic book which deceives people on several occasions based on not understanding the book as a whole. Maybe. Either way, he creates spirits called Cheruphis, and then at some point gives Luxu his Keyblade and a black box. Then he disappears. In absolute shortness, he's probably the most powerful and knowledgeable Keyblade master that has ever and to ever exist. With that brief description out of the way, let's get into the meat of the theory. There is a lot of evidence to suggest that the Master of Masters could be one of many people in the Kingdom Hearts series. However, only one character really fits the description line perfectly, in my opinion. Although he could be a completely new character, I don't think he is unless he is related to another character, which would also be quite interesting as well. Either way, I would like to suggest that the Master of Masters is none other than Sora. Sort of. I actually believe that the Master of Masters is actually Sora's nobody. And I know that's Roxas, but Roxas is a bit of a weird case for a nobody due to the nature of Sora's heart at the time. If you recall parts 1 and 3, I suggested that and provided evidence for Kingdom Hearts being the collection of Sora's hearts after he's finally defeated once and for all, and the Dark Inferno being his true Heartless. I also suggested that he was sent back to the beginning of time. This puts everything in the right place, except for what happens to his body. We know that Sora can have a nobody, hence Roxas exists, and his defeat would create a new nobody, his true nobody. Let's look at the evidence that suggests the Master of Masters could be Sora's nobody, that he had been sent back in time. I'm going to start with a cutscene from Union Cross. I'm sorry, but I don't have the means to record any footage, so I'm using screenshots instead for this bit. The scene is a conversation between the Master of Masters and Luxu, and mainly focuses around the Keyblade War that occurred when he was but a boy. This particular detail would put him in the right age bracket for Sora during Kingdom Hearts 3. I think this conversation is actually about the second Keyblade War, not the one taking place in Union Cross. This would make sense as well in terms of this theory, and by what else is said in the cutscene. Firstly, I'm going to skip over the no master bit for now, but I will return to it. The second thing to be mentioned is the fact that there were Keyblade Warders alongside him, but they don't really count, according to the Master of Masters. Now, this is a really weird thing to say, until you consider that almost every single Keyblade is manufactured. To this there are 3 exceptions: the Kingdom TD, the Keyblade, and most importantly, the Kingdom Key that Sora possesses. It is also important to remember that nobody's possessed neither the exact same personality or the exact memories of their whole being, as somewhat depicted in 358 over 2 days. In this situation, the Master of Masters might be referring to how his Keyblade chose him, while everyone else either inherited or made their own, and don't mention the whole thing about Riku being intended only on the Kingdom Key, because I don't think that is actually true. It's just something that Sora believes for some reason. I'll explain more later. Following on from that, the Master starts to explain how the darkness he fought against could be simply called monsters, but they looked like people. When Luxu asks if they were human, the Master simply replies that he didn't say that. To me, this sounds on par with some of the enemies that Sora fights against. Ansem was a Heartless that had the form of a human. Vanitas literally was nothing but darkness that looked exactly like Sora himself. Any member of the original Organization 13 was a nobody that was strong-willed enough to maintain their appearance. A lot of the big bads that Sora had to fight against looked human but weren't, and even then, he did fight some humans as well. For instance, Xehanort. As the quote tells us, he never says he did or did not fight against humans, so he could have fought against a mixture of humans and non-humans. This works really well, almost a little too well in my opinion, especially if the Master of Masters is at least Sora after being sent back in time. Then we have the Master saying how the Keyblade War has always been raging on, and the Keyblade War isn't about to begin. In fact, it might finally come to an end. I think this might be in personal reference, because he would definitely know that there was going to be another Keyblade War after this one. However, for him, this would be the conclusion, as this would mean that he has no part to play in the world following and can wait it out until after the next Keyblade War, as he has already taken part in that war. It's a bit confusing, but I think you can get what I mean. In short, he has been ensuring the future. Once the Keyblade War Union Cross happens, he doesn't need to micromanage anymore, other than to give a little prod every now and again. If he is in fact Sora's nobody, then he has to make sure everything goes exactly as it went. Otherwise, they would end up with some nasty paradox or something. Hence, he doesn't give Luxu a copy of the Book of Prophecies. He then starts to describe the rest of his plan or design, where the Dandelions will rebuild the world after it has been destroyed. This is simply just explaining exactly how the worlds ended up separated. The Keyblade War broke the world, and so the world has to be rebuilt in separate pieces. This is not really part of the theory, as we already knew this, but I just wanted to mention it as it's still important to the lore. Then we get, I could go for a nice long break right about now. This to me suggests that the Master of Masters has been doing this for a very long time, and is starting to become happy to leave the rest of the work to others while he does something else. I'm not sure what really, but I like to think that he just starts to go and chill out in the final world or something. After that, we get a few mentions of how the plan was orchestrated, and that maybe not everyone will escape the Data Daybreak Town. I can't really think of anything for this one except that he's just being realistic. So what have we gathered about the Master from this cutscene that is absolute? 1. He has no Master. 2. The Master has experienced a Keyblade War when he was still young. 3. He didn't believe that the other Keyblade Warders truly counted. And 4. Darkness took a human form, but was not necessarily human, but also could have been. These 4 things would all line up with him being Sora's nobody that was displaced in time. The only issue is his attitude towards the other Keyblade Warders. This is the exact opposite from what Sora would say. So it's possibly just because he is a nobody and doesn't think in the same way, although there could be other reasons. I should probably explain the whole true Master of the Kingdom Key thing now, and I've still got the no Master to explain as well, but that can wait until later. The whole Kingdom Key thing started in the first Kingdom Hearts game, when Riku takes Sora's Keyblade. After successfully summoning Sora's Keyblade to his hand, Riku says Maleficent was right. Why do we believe Maleficent? I guess it's reasonable because Riku was able to do it, but Keyblades are sentient. Isn't it more likely the Keyblade was testing Sora, trying to gauge how strong his heart truly was at the time? Sora already went through the whole Station of Awakening at the beginning of the game, before Riku was taken by the darkness. If Riku was the intended master, then wouldn't it make sense that the Station of Awakening portion of the game would take place just after Riku is taken? Personally, I haven't noticed anyone else ever even mention that Sora wasn't meant to wield the Keyblade, but they never correct him when he says that he knows he was never meant to. It just doesn't make sense to me. This has been one of my only complaints about the story of Kingdom Hearts, that this is never properly addressed by anyone on any actual notability. I mean, what does Maleficent actually know about Keyblades anyway? Was that rant out of the way? Let's move on. The next cutscene I would like to talk about is the opening cutscene of the Remind DLC. This is the scene between the Master of Masters and young Xehanort. This cutscene is filled with little details from the subtle hand movements to curious usage of words. A lot of these had led me to conclusion that the Master is almost certainly an older Sora at the very least, and I hope I can convey that to you. I'm just going to start off with saying that the Master of Masters' personality and manner of speaking can reflect many characters in the series. These include Digbar and Demix, as well as Sora. Although Sora's personality comes through as a rarity compared to other characters, but there are several little actions and specific choices of words that convince me that he is actually Sora's nobody. Let's watch through the cutscene together. I'll pause and talk when one of these actions or scenes comes up.
Yeah. It wards off darkness. It's useful.
Told ya. So, how'd it go?
The tour. I learned the reason for my existence.
Oh! Tell me more.
All around the world, people live seemingly peaceful lives. They believe themselves to be moral and virtuous, but it's all an act. Darkness lurks in the pit of everyone's heart. Their light is a total farce.
Sounds like your trip around the world opened your eyes, but you got a little bit more than you anticipated. You must have seen a lot of darkness.
Those who are weak and who desire greater power simply strip the strong of their power and convince themselves they've earned it. That's how people become tainted by darkness. They believe what they want to believe, using hollow reasons as justification. They repeat this cycle, and their darkness grows.
So you're saying the weak feel the need to justify their actions to maintain a sense of self. Can't let that slide?
No. It's better they be ruled by darkness. People carry delusions of having power, but it's a lie. They are but sheep pretending to be wolves.
Right, this isn't much, but I feel like it's significant, and I'm sure we wouldn't have seen this if it weren't. Here, we see the Master of Masters adjust its hands and close his fingers up a bit more than how they rested before, his right hand closing tighter around his left. This might not mean anything, however, I personally believe that this is a small expression of his anger. I think the Master of Masters is angered by what Xehanort is saying. To summarise why, I believe it is because young Xehanort is berating Sora due to how he always said, "My friends are my power," as this is nearly exactly what young Xehanort said. The weak take the power from the strong and claim that they've earned it, and Xehanort believes that that is the root of darkness. However, why would this anger the Master? He doesn't need other people to be strong, and I doubt he ever did. So what is the problem? Well, let's just imagine how Sora would react to someone saying this to him. I would bet he would be very angry about the whole thing and become quite aggressive and or defensive. Obviously, the Master isn't like that, instead he keeps his calm, but this small and almost unnoticeable gesture slips out. This is just what I make as a scene. Others will have different opinions, of course.
Though I admit, I can understand why.
Oh, I've never heard that one before. A Keyblade wielder willing to side with the darkness? And be until the darkness consumes them.
Because left alone, the world would fall to chaos. There needs to be order.
You sure about that? Why not just sit back and watch it play out?
Understanding hearts is difficult. more so the emotions within. I simply realize that it's easy to dismiss what you don't comprehend.
All right, all right. The world needs you. I'll grant you that one.
Moving on to this bit of dialogue. It isn't so much what the master says, but the way he says it. More specifically, how he says, "I'll grant you that one." To me, it's how his voice becomes subtly quieter and his tone of voice seems to shift away from his normal tone, which I can't really name, to one that, in my opinion, is more begrudging. It's almost as if he doesn't want to admit it, but he has to in order for events to go as planned. Speaking of which, he has been planning this for a very long time already. It's pretty clear that he had planned nearly all of the events that took place in Union Cross, and we know that he must have already met with young Xehanort before this. So what is his end goal? More on that later. Right now though, it seems weird that the Master would not want to admit that the world needs him, especially as this is part of his plan, right? But what if his plan isn't his own? As in, he made the plan, but for it to work, he needs events to happen in a particular way to avoid any potential paradoxes that might happen along the way. Maybe he doesn't actually want to admit that the world needs Xehanort because they don't actually need him. It's just that the Master needs Xehanort to believe this so that a set of events can happen, but he also doesn't like what it is that Xehanort will do. If that's the case, then it only makes his plan that much more confusing.
I don't know what I can do, but I will act. What comes next is too important.
I suppose letting false light dictate the future might be a pretty lousy move. So, you can make a change. You have that power. What do you want for the world?
Power, eh? Who knows? My training's coming to an end, and the exam's not far off. Maybe I can gain some clarity then.
You're letting the exam decide? Listen to me. The results don't matter.
Next up, we have the Master say that the results of the Mark of Mastery exam don't matter. That's right, the Master of Masters basically just said that the Mark of Mastery exam doesn't matter. And to be honest, it sounds like he's talking from experience. That could be because he created the Mark of Mastery, and the exams go along with it, and hence he would never have gotten it, so to speak. Instead he would have bestowed it upon himself. But isn't there another character we know of that failed the exam, but was still incredibly powerful and able to defeat true masters, such as Master Xehanort himself, on a regular basis? This is just one parallel that really links Sora and the Master of Masters together. While Sora failed and believed he wasn't good enough throughout Kingdom Hearts 3 as a result, the Master of Masters knows that it doesn't actually mean anything. It's just a formality. This also gives some more light as to why Sora was never granted the Mark of Mastery by Yen Sid, even though it could be assumed that Sora would be able to make a more than full recovery. Maybe Yen Sid wanted Sora to doubt himself so that he would work harder to become more powerful on his own, because that's when Sora is usually at his weakest, but it's still ridiculously powerful, and I think it's just because of what Sora believes about himself. So he isn't actually any weaker by himself, he just thinks that he is.
You believe the world needs you. Sounds like you already know where you're headed.
It's funny. Somehow, I can sense where I'm supposed to go, and what I'm supposed to do. Yes. Even this coat. There's something familiar about it. As if I'm meant to wear this.
No. You'll ditch it soon.
What do you mean?
I mean that one day you're going to outgrow it.
How so?
If you truly possess great power, the darkness can't control you. You won't need a silly old coat to stay safe. In fact, you'll be the one controlling the darkness instead. Me, on the other hand, I'm too much of a scaredy cat to ever take mine off.
Following on is the Master telling Xehanort that he will be ditching the coat at some point, when he becomes powerful enough to control the darkness. However, the Master also says that he is too scared to ever take his off. This sounds odd to me. This is the Master of Masters. It is incredibly likely that no one has ever, or will ever, get close to how powerful he is. But he's still scared of the darkness. It just doesn't sit well with me. The only thing that makes sense is that the coat has another purpose, one that no one other than the Master and Luxu know about. Perhaps it's the case that this other purpose is linked to him potentially being a nobody that doesn't want to develop or acquire a new heart. Maybe the coat also slows and or prevents that from happening. So it would also explain why Xemnas used them for the original Organization 13 if he knew about this purpose, as I'm fairly sure that nobodies wouldn't be adversely affected by the darkness.
Who are you, really? Some kind of fortune teller?
Well, I could lie and tell you that's what I am when I'm actually a brilliant artist, or even a scholar.
Here we have a nice piece of dialogue, where the Master may be referring to several characters that we already know from the series, and also could be referring to a selection that are very closely linked with Sora and his memories. The two people that come to mind first for the two described roles are Naminé and Ansem the Wise, filling their respective roles. Both had a part in repairing Sora's memories after Naminé herself meddled with them in the Chain of Memories. Naminé used her powers to alter Sora's memories, changing some details while completely removing some memories. Her alterations also included making Sora forget who Kari was and made him believe that he loved Naminé instead, deceiving him into the blue. She effectively lied to him without saying a word. We do also know that Naminé enjoyed drawing, if the White Room in Twilight Town Mansion is anything to go by. However, she did repair Sora's memory in the end, but never got the chance to really become friends with him. Maybe this is why the Master uses this exact wording, because he can't quite remember everything in his life, and these two just come to mind due to their involvement with his memory when he was still Sora. But he may still be lingering on the fact that he still hasn't fully thanked Naminé yet, or at least according to Sora, hasn't. Then we move on to Ansem the Wise. Ansem was indeed a scholar. He spent years researching the heart and the world, studying how they connected to one another. However, he was betrayed by Xehanort. Xehanort, whilst in Terra's body, stole Ansem's name and research, pushing the boundaries and tarnishing Ansem's reputation by use of morally questionable experiments. Ansem the Wise disappeared and took on the identity Diz while he plotted his revenge. He used people and deceived them to move forward his own goals. In the end, he reveals himself and apologizes for what he has done, before supposedly dying in Kingdom Hearts 2. With this one sentence, we have two links to Sora via people entwined with his memories. It doesn't make sense for anyone else to have mentioned these two occupations unless they knew about how Naminé and Ansem the Wise were linked. Thus, I would say that this proves that the Master at least knows how they were linked, which means he would also have to know how they linked to Sora.
I could tell you that I dream of world peace, when I'm actually planning for its destruction.
Next up, we have the Master saying, I could tell you that I dream of world peace, when I'm actually planning its destruction. This is a really weird sentence because he has already done both of these things. It was his plan that resulted in the First Keyblade War, the one that destroyed the world, but his plan was to bring about peace for what was left so that they could rebuild, even if that peace was only temporary. The fact that he says this here suggests that he is planning the same thing or something very similar. Maybe it is his intention for the world to feel threatened, so that when someone is threatened or in danger. Again, more on this point later.
The truth is what you see with your eyes, not what you hear.
Then we have the Master say this, and it's the perfect line for him to say, honestly. I think this because of his gazing eye that allows him, and only him, to see the future. He then writes it down into the Book of Prophecies. When you read a book, you are effectively hearing what the author has written. You don't see it how they see it, or intend for it to be read. Hence, it could be false or misinterpreted. I believe that the Master is directly referring to the Book of Prophecies here, suggesting that the book is inaccurate or intentionally misleading. I mean, think about it. The book was wrong about both Keyway Wars. In neither one did light expire, both times light survived. Honestly, it's the perfect tool to cause all of this. If the book was made to deceive people, then it makes sense that it would say that light expires when the Master would know that light would always survive through one means or another. I stated in part 1 that I'm fairly confident that the book has now expired, that it is of almost no use to anyone anymore, and doesn't describe anything about potential future events by the end of Parts 3. This would mean that it is still deceiving people such as the Maleficent, who is certain that it is accurate and will reveal the future to her. Also, I think Master Ava realised this before giving her copy to Frank, being confident that he too might realise the deception while the Master's intended recipient would have taken it at face value. In short, the book is a lie, and a tool the Master uses to further his own agenda.
So, your name?
What did I just...
Then we have this. I just love the Master's reaction to Xehanort asking him his name. However, this action reminds me of both Enix and Sora. I can very well see both of them doing this, but the Master does sound like Demix, at least a little in this scene. I won't say that the Master cannot possibly be Demix or vice versa. If he were though, would anyone really be happy with it? It just doesn't fit with the character at all. Yes, they would both be happy to just sit back and watch events unfold around them, but would Xemnas ever let it slide if he knew?
Never mind. I guess there's no harm. My name is...
After hearing his name, Xehanort is taken by surprise. This would only happen if he knew someone of the same name. By the way, I'm fairly sure this is young Xehanort from after his defeat in Kingdom Hearts 3.
I'm a lost master.
Lost Master?
This is followed by him being once again stunned when the Master says he is a lost master, leaving him so surprised that he repeats said words. This to me seems like he knows who this person is and has met them. However, Xehanort is also sure at this point that this person should have died before becoming a master at all. If the Master said his name was Sora, then this would definitely be Xehanort's response, in my opinion. However, it does suggest that Xehanort lost at the end. In truth, it doesn't confirm this at all. All young Xehanort would know is that for some reason Sora somehow travelled back in time, and for some reason he now seems to be aiding the darkness to achieve an unknown goal. But this is only the case if the Master is actually Sora or his future nobody.
May your heart be your guiding key.
What's so funny, old man? Mind sharing with us?
I stand here today because of a fated encounter. Very many years ago, when I was still a young lad. I never learned who he was, and perhaps I never will.
Moving on, Master Xehanort goes on to say that he never learned who the Master was. But that's a complete lie. He knows what his name is, so why not tell them? Let's say he did tell them his name, and that he said the Master's name was Sora. How do you think they would react? if you found out that your leader was prompted to do what he is doing by the biggest threat to the goal being achieved, how quickly would you jump ship? Would you really want to stick around to see how everything goes down?
But I see now the truth he spoke of.
We don't have time for bedtime stories.
With that out of the way, I have to explain some things I said I would cover later on. And there is more stuff I would love to discuss, but I just don't have the time to do so. I will only clarify and summarise what is already here and what I have said I will. I'm really cutting it close as Melody of Memory is right around the corner and I still have to start working on the next part. Earlier, I mentioned that the Master of Masters didn't have a master. I took the time to look through all the scenes that have Sora and Yensid interact. Out of all of the scenes I don't have any from Dream Drop Distance by the way. Out of the 6 or 7 cutscenes, Sora only ever called Yensid Master in 2 of them. One of them was when he wanted something, and the other was when Yensid saved him and the other Guardians of Light in the Keyblade Graveyard. This got me thinking that Sora might not actually think of Yensid as being his master, especially as Yensid doesn't actually teach him anything, he only ever points Sora in the right direction. I also suggested that the Master's grand plan requires someone to be in danger, that someone would likely be Sora, as his Keyblade first materializes when his world is already being consumed by darkness, and he was also nearly consumed by it as well. This is not the only instance we actually see a Keyblade ruler first gain their Keyblade, so we know that they don't only materialize for the first time when their chosen ruler is in a life-threatening situation. But it could be the case that Sora's Keyblade is unique and it only appears when the worlds are in danger. There isn't much evidence to support this idea, but it makes sense as we never see anyone else ever get their Keyblade, and we know that Aqua and Terra got theirs during a time of relative peace. If this is the case, then it is possible that the Master needed Xehanort to put the worlds into a threatening state and put Sora in that same position so that his Keyblade would emerge for the first time. This leads on nicely to my theory of what the Master's current plan is. I'm certain that his plan is actually pretty simple. Maybe his goal is simply to get events to go the exact way that they unfold. Let's just say that the Master is in fact Zora's future nobody. Then that would mean that he would have lived through the events of all of the games already, excluding Union Cross and Dark Road. If it were the case, then the Master would have to ensure that events unfold the way they happened before, because otherwise it could cause a major paradox. If anything changed, it could result in the events that sent himself to the past not happening, which would then mean that he was never sent to the past, which is a paradox. With that said, what is the end goal? What is it that the Master wants to achieve? Well, if what I've been saying is true, and he is Sora's nobody, and the coat does prevent nobodies from gaining new hearts, then he may be trying to completely recomplete himself. In part 1, I suggested that Sora might be time travelling and as such accumulating a large number of copies of his own heart. What if the Master is trying to acquire one of these hearts? Perhaps the original one that Sora was born with. This would make some sense with everything else considered. He needs the Gazing Eye because nobodies don't have a perfect memory of their lives. Hence the Gazing Eye is most likely just to help him remember exactly how everything happened the first time around. Also, nobodies have mildly different personalities from their original selves, which will explain why he doesn't act exactly like Sora and his opinions are different from before. This whole idea will be developed in the next part. In short, all the Master of Masters wants is to be whole again. Completely whole. He wants his original part back, which means he is going to have to defeat Sora and peak it. Well, that's it. I'm ending the video here. This has taken a very long time to make, and I'm sorry for uploading this today. I planned to have it up on the 7th or yesterday at the latest, but I have been working on this script for a really long time. It's been a nightmare. The last part will be up tomorrow, In that, I will be summarising and putting everything I've discussed together into one complete theory, so stay tuned. Either way, thank you very much for watching. If you liked the video, please leave a like. Also, please consider commenting. What do you think of my theory? What are your own ideas? Please feel free to discuss your opinions together, but I will ask that you stay respectful of each other's opinions. With that said, I'll see you in the next video. Until then, goodbye.